All right, guys, DFS Army VIPs, it's your boy Chapadong again. What I'm going to do is dive into the cash game methodology, show you the cash game lineups for tonight's main slate. That's what we have the ownerships for right now. Caveat, these will change, okay? We don't have any confirmed lineups for the main slate yet. As players get scratched and this, that, and the other, ownerships shift around. This player pool will change, but I want to show you how it's done, how we're looking for these sorts of things, as I've been doing for the past couple of weeks, and what has produced the 15-4 record that you hear me talking about, just because I'm keeping track, for myself, and I feel like a few of you guys might be interested or might benefit from it as well, in terms of maybe learning to simplify your own game. But we're going to add in those 100-man leagues I was talking about. I want to show you also how I would build for 100-man leagues, because when there are 3 max tournaments, we can't cover every base. We don't need to get super contrarian to get into the top, 12 of a 100-man league anyway. We can play a lot of chalk. We don't need to target the chalk, but we can play a lot of chalk. We don't need to get super contrarian with pitching. We don't need to get super contrarian with all this weird stuff. It's just not generating enough leverage for us. If we were turning $1 into $1,000, that'd be one thing. If we were trying to beat 50,000 people, that'd be another thing. But we're just trying to turn $1 into $25, and we're just trying to beat 100 people to do it. We just don't need to get that too funky. We'll still primarily use 4x3 stacks, maybe some 3x2 type stacks or whatever, to maybe not over concentrate, but yet still correlate, if that makes sense. And so we're going to use these 2 methodologies to just go boom, boom, and show you what I would be doing, or how I'm going to start doing this. And of course, if you follow these little documentary videos, then you'll see how I ebb and flow, maybe a slate where I take a little bit of a different twist on something, like I've already done once or twice for cash games, or how I'm going to morph and evolve based on results and based on what I'm seeing. And then I think that's going to help some of you guys realize that we're largely going to be doing the same thing in a very repeatable process, day in and day out, very boring, very methodical, but we're going to make occasional changes, or we're going to pay attention to our results and sort of steer the ship in that direction if we find something that seems to be working and seems to be worth pursuing. First things first, though, let's build that cash lineup and use the optimizer to do so. Main slate, FanDuel. We can do DraftKings some other time, but we'll just start with FanDuel. And we'll dive down in here and we'll do our usual 2 unique players, 5 lineups. And we're just not going to do any stacking or anything. We're going to sort by projected ownership, which we already are. And these ownerships may not be all the way in yet either, just for full disclosure. But then we're just going to go position by position, and we'll check in Zach Gallen. And these 4 guys are the ones that are going to be used. Probably preferable to Zach Gallen, to where if you only wanted to use him, that's fine. But if you wanted to include Bassett, Lorenzen, Bieber, I guess that's okay, being that they're going to garner some ownership as well. Catcher and first base, we're looking at Salvi out in Colorado and Coors Field, of course, and then everybody else is down at 2% and below. For now, Cron is very, very high. We're going to need to use some others. These lineups need to confirm, but let's say for now that we had a Rizzo and a Walker and a Muncy and a Gurriel or whatever type guys in there, okay? Now, where is Texas on the main slate? Should be a Brad Miller in here somewhere, too. I guess not. He's been a good cash game play lately as well. So I'm going to use a little bit of what I know from paying attention the past couple of weeks, because our ownerships are not complete yet. But McMahon's going to be a lot of Colorado. Brendan Rodgers. Jose Altuve, great cash game play most of the time. Simeon's been a little cold, but he gets the ownership. So when he explodes, it's going to hurt if you don't have him. Trey Turner. And then we'll leave that alone. DJ LeMahieu I would include. DJ LeMahieu is one of my favorite cash game plays most of the time. Bobby Witt, Donaldson, I'm not a big fan of. He's a little up and down. I know he's been more up than down in the last game or 2. Jose Ramirez has been more down than up. Devers is another decent one. Bregman's been decent lately. Arias I used last night. So just to give me a little bit of flexibility here. I know they were carrying low ownerships. These guys would not normally make my list. But again, because the ownerships are not complete yet, I'm going to go ahead and do it just for the sake of showing you the example of building the video. Shortstops, there they are. Just write A through Z. Pretty much. And outfield's usually where we get a little bit more. Benintendi, okay, he hit a bomb last night, whatever. He's been cold lately. Connor Joe, Aaron Judge has been great. Giancarlo Stanton's been pretty good. Kyle Tucker's been more hit than miss. Soto, Dozier is not usually a cash game type of play. Hilliard, Brantley's been fine. Grichuk's very streaky as well. So we'll cut it off at about there. We've got a lot more players than usual at 32 players. This number will come down as the day goes on, but I just want to see where we land on a few lineups. I'm looking for, okay, there's going to be heavy Coors exposure. 3 bats from Kansas City using Bieber, 2 Colorado Rockies bats with Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Marcus Semien. These are fine. This is a fine lineup. As long as you're inside that player pool, any combination that spits out is probably pretty good for cash games. It's just going to have good nights and bad nights. Down here, using Bieber again. We're using Bieber in all of our lineups, Salvi Perez in all of our lineups, it looks like. Semien, Benintendi, Soto, and then the other guys are kind of rotating in and out. So there's 3 Royals. No Rockies. That's very interesting. No Rockies. Okay, so if you wanted to fade Coors, or fade Colorado, there you go. This one's going to use 2 and 2 and a Dodger, Ranger. Watch this. This is a better looking cash game, a prototypical cash game lineup, because it's not using more than about 3 bats from any given team, and that's usually the number that I like to draw. Unless the slate's really small or unless something really stands out, you can end up in Coors Field with 5 or 6 bats combined last night and do very, very well. But some nights it's going to hurt you if that game doesn't absolutely explode. Then you've almost got too many bats in it, and it can actually hurt you in the other direction as well. So I kind of like to try and spread things out a little bit for cash games. Now, for 100-man leagues, I'm going to stack. So what would I do after doing this, picking my cash game lineup, maybe making, a change or 2 to a couple of players, get the lineup the way I like it using that player pool. Now what would I do for 100-man leagues? Well, I would do a couple of things. I would come back. The first thing I would do is I would check every player back so I didn't forget to do that, right? I would go into the stacking rules here in a minute, but I'm going to shift down to tournament mode. I'm going to increase my uniques maybe to 3 players, maybe even 4 sometimes. I'm going to build more lineups. If I want to build, say, 20 lineups for 100-man leagues, I may only use 3, 4, 5 of these lineups, but I want to build 20 to 25 lineups. I'm also going to infuse some randomization. I'm a big randomization guy for baseball. So now that I've got that kind of set up, I'll come back to the stacking in a minute. But I've got everybody checked in. Everybody's eligible. Okay. Now, what am I going to do for that stack? I'm going to focus on a few teams that I like. Whether it was using that method I showed you in that first video with this little spreadsheet and the power scores and stuff, or whether it's just taking the top 5 projected offenses on the slate. I come to the MLB leverage stacking tool, knowing it also shifts with ownership, so it's not necessarily complete yet. But I'm not using the top 5 leverage ranks because I'm going to end up with some really low-owned teams sometimes, and that's just, in my opinion, a little bit too much risk. You don't need that kind of leverage in a 100-man league. You might in the nickels, you might in the quarters, but you're not going to need it in a single entry with 1,500 people in it or a 100-man league or anything like that. You can play a little closer to the vest and play a little bit more of the obvious chalky matchups like Coors Field, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm looking at average projected points, and I would say, well, who are the top 5 teams? Colorado, Kansas City, LA, Houston, and who was my 5th one? New York Yankees at 9.93. Now, I included some others because these are early slaters, like 9.81 from the Angels, because I did not know who was on the slate and who wasn't. But those top 5 teams on this were all on the main slate, so I would write them down. Colorado, Houston, Kansas City, LA, and the New York Yankees. And as fast as I rattled that off, you can tell I already wrote it down in advance. I'm going to come back now to the stacking. And these are the only teams I'm going to use. Okay? So when I check back, New York, LA, who else was in there? Oh, the Angels are on the main slate. How do you like that? But they're not one of my top 5 teams. KC, Houston, Colorado. There's Houston, there's KC, there's Colorado. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, right? Check these teams back. I mean, if you wanted to include a few more teams, feel free. You make this yours. I'm just saying I'm trying to pigeonhole down to where I'm getting pretty similar lineups, pretty focused on the top projections, and then I'm going to let things go from there. I'm not taking a ton of risk by going after super low-owned Seattle or anything like that, right? But if I wanted to include the LA Angels, Philadelphia, Boston, whatever had a lot of value in Texas or something, you can do those things, okay? I'm not saying this is the only way to do this. I'm just saying this is how I'm starting. This is what I'm doing. If I don't want to see any team in any more than, say, 25% of my lineups, then that's what I'm going to do. I'll put a cap on both sides of this because it's the exact same stack 1, exact same stack 2. It's just going to mix and match the teams. I'm going to run mostly a 4x3. If I wanted to, I could run a 4x X. In fact, let's do that. We don't need to stack super, super hard to win these things. Let's run, say, a couple of 3x2s in, say, 30% of the lineups, and the rest are 4 by X in 70% of the lineups. I'm also going to randomly select these teams. I want to see if this works. Now, I've not done this before, but I'm hoping that it only uses the teams I've checked. I hope I don't see a stack of the New York Yankees and the Chicago White Sox, or somebody that I did not choose on the other side. But when I make my 20 to 25 lineups, hopefully I only see combinations of these 5 teams. Now, the random thing is I don't give a crap what combination of them I see, right? So when I go to stacks, then there they are. There's the 5, there's the 5. Perfect. It worked out just fine. And then when I look at the combinations, I can look at, okay, I've got a good bit of Houston, New York. That's probably a fairly projected, highly projected combination. But because I'm only using it in 20-25% of my lineups, then the optimizer is going to kick that out and go looking for other stuff, which is what I want. I want options because we know that nothing is purely predictable in baseball. And I'm using different pitchers. You can see Gallen in one, Bieber in the other. That's fine. If you wanted to go back and control your player pool and cut out some of those pitchers so you're only using your 2 or 3 favorites, or if you wanted to like and adore, that's fine too. All this stuff is kind of in play, but you want to be careful at what you're doing so that you don't, again, you don't overthink it. You're letting the projections mostly guide what you do. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start picking some of these lineups, and I'm going to see, who I like the most. So if the highest owned player I got is Juan Soto at 35%, that's great. That means I've got a wide mix of opportunities to choose from. So if I like this lineup, what do we got? 1, 2, 3 Houston bats and 2 Royals bats with Gleyber Torres as a one-off and Mike Trout as a one-off. If you like that lineup, use it. Throw it in the 100-man league, right? If I come down here, now I've got what? This one looks largely unstacked, so we can come down a little bit more. Come down a little bit more. There's 1, 2, 3 Royals, 4 Royals. 1, 2, 3, 4 Royals, and 2 Yankees. Again, Yankees, Houston, Dodgers, they're all in my list of the top offenses on the slate per the MLB leverage stacking tool. So I would welcome these combinations in whatever order they throw at me. I may not be thrilled with a 9-hole hitter, but if that's what allows the rest of the stuff to come together, then I may or may not use it. This is one where I might even go in and uncheck 7, 8, 9-hole hitters and focus on the tops of the orders. But again, as you saw last night, a lot of 8 and 9-hole hitters were going off all over the place. So you want to include them sometimes because they make the stack work, right? Come down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 by 3. Okay. All Coors Field with a Trey Turner one-off, right? 4 Royals, 3 Rockies. Bieber is your pitcher and Turner is your one-off. Fine. If you like that one, use it. Come down a little bit more. Let's see what else it's mixing up. We've got 1, 2, 3 Rockies, 2 Yankees with the Dodger and Mike Trout and Juan Soto. You can't argue that's not a strong lineup. It may not work today, and you may not want to be using German Marquez as your pitcher, so maybe this lineup is not favorable to you, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4 Yankees. Looks like a couple of Dodgers, Juan Soto and Varsho as well. Once again, strong lineups. These are just focused on what you're paring down as the teams. If you wanted to come up and, like I said, open it up a little bit more and include LA, and Boston and Philadelphia on the one side only, then you can rerun the machine and see where that takes you with your 3x2s and your 4x X's. Maybe you come off on a combination that you like a little bit better. If we scroll down here more towards the bottom where it'll start picking up some of those other teams, there's 4 Dodgers and 2 Angels. Maybe you like that lineup. There's 4 Astros and 2 Phillies and 2 Angels. It's a 4x2x2. Maybe you like that stack with Zach Gallen as a relatively chalky pitcher up top. It's plenty different enough, plenty solid enough to win a 100-man league, but plenty different enough to be alone at the top. These are just the method. What I'll do is my picks are going to be different than yours. The things that appeal to me are going to be a little bit different than what appeals to you. Nobody's to say who's right and who's wrong necessarily. We're just trying to compile up some results. And if over a larger sample of 20, 30, 50 slates of doing this, we are profitable, then who the hell cares how we got there? We're trying to be profitable in our cash games first. We're trying to be profitable in our 100-man leagues as well. And then we're trying to run some wide open MME type stuff in the nickels and the quarters. And now you're covering the bases on a slate really, really well. You've got some cash games going. You've got some middling tournament stuff going. And you've got some big GPPs for the big score going. And if you're grinding up positive bankrolls doing this, then you're doing something right. So we'll come back and we'll revisit this stuff a little bit later in terms of when ownership's hit and are a little bit more firm. But for now, this is the idea of where we're going to go for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully we talk about it. And hopefully we get results. See y'all. Peace out.